Oliver, tell us a little bit about the election process itself. This result was a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, the election today was pretty much a parody of an election, as most people would know it. The chief executive election, at the best of times, is not the most democratic race. It's chosen by a hand-picked committee of, in this case, 1,461 people, most of whom are pretty much lean heavily towards being pro-Beijing. The election today took place over 2.5 hours. The Hong Kong government was keen to ensure it looked as normal as possible, even issuing turnout figures every hour. In the end, the turnout was about 98.5%. The vote took only about 10 minutes to count, and John Lee, within 3 minutes, had already gained the 751 requisite votes that he needed to be approved. 8 people voted not in support of him. The ballot did give an option of that, but even if there had been more than half rejecting him, that would not necessarily have meant that his candidacy itself would have been rejected. So it certainly was a strange election. And one thing to note is that the committee that selected the election committee, that vetted them rather, was overseen by none other than John Lee himself when he was Chief Secretary just a few months ago. So it is very much a different election, being held under the enhancing election campaign that Beijing has imposed upon Hong Kong to encourage that, quote, only patriots rule Hong Kong. And John Lee is somebody that, in Beijing's eyes, is very much a patriot.
So who exactly is John Lee then? As you say, he's known to be a staunch supporter of Beijing.
Yeah, John Lee has had a 36-year career as a police officer. He entered the Hong Kong police at the age of 18. In 2012, he entered government, and for the last 5 years, he has been a key member of Carrie Lam's cabinet, serving first as Security Secretary, and he had a very prominent role during the 2019 protests, which the government cracked down somewhat quite violently, although the protests, of course, themselves were at times violent too. For the last year, John Lee has been the Chief Secretary, which is Carrie Lam's number 2. So he has been rather a key member of the government over the past year. He himself says that he hopes to make Hong Kong a city of hope again, and he wants to stress unity. Now, of course, the government has managed to have some semblance of unity, mainly by locking up most of the pro-democracy opposition for holding a primary ahead of last year's Legislative Council elections. And its aim was to basically make Hong Kong ungovernable by getting a majority in the Legislative Council. In most places in the world, that would be considered simple politics. In Hong Kong, it's considered potential sedition, and they have been locked up for the last 14 months, most of them, and probably won't come to trial for another year or so. John Lee says he wants to get the economy running again, but he certainly shows no sign of desisting from Hong Kong's very strict zero COVID policy, which is, many people say, is actually being dictated to and is dependent upon Beijing, because Beijing, of course, has its very own one. John Lee is unlikely to step out of line on that, and things are going to continue as usual for the next few months alone.